Okay. Hi, everybody. My name is Richard Lesperance. I go by the name of My Man Richard. Welcome to A Better Lifestyle. Today, I have the pleasure to have Mark Collins with me. Welcome, Mark, to the podcast.
Thank you, Richard. It's great being here.
No problem. Tell us a little bit about yourself. Who is Mark Collins?
Yeah. Well, if you talk professionally, I'd be a business and life coach, really trying to help people to understand how to unpack, unlock the hero on the inside so that they can have the life in their business relationships and all parts of their life that they're created for. On a personal level, a husband, father, been married 33 years, got 3 adult kids. And I tell people we also have 3 adult dogs that we treat like our kids. So that's me in a nutshell.
All right. We're gonna talk about imposter syndrome. What is imposter syndrome?
Yeah, imposter syndrome, first, Richard, is something that I dealt with in my own life, either through, school all the way up to adulthood into business development. It really is this feeling that you're not really qualified for what you're walking into, whether it's in your job, your position, your role, that boardroom that you're walking into, that business you're trying to start. It's feeling that you're not capable of succeeding in that environment. And for me, it was something I had challenge with as well, growing up and feeling that I didn't have the value and worth that I believed I could have. Really trying to unpack that and figure out how to have a solution for that. Not mantras and things that you do to try and remind yourself of who you could be, but really living from who you were created to be. So imposter syndrome is the opposite of that, feeling that instead of being the answer to the circumstance you're walking into, you're the question. And I tell the people I work with that that's the opposite of what the truth is. The truth is you're the answer to the circumstance, the situation, the challenge that you're walking into.
So how did you overcome imposter syndrome?
That's a great question, Richard. It was a journey, you know. For myself, the people that I work with, I tell them this, that we're either living from who we're created to be or what our life has told us we are. And so for me, what life told me was that I had a father I couldn't measure up to. I wasn't as smart as the other students. I wasn't the person that was capable of succeeding at that highest level that other people had. So I really tried to figure out how to, that man I hoped I could be on the inside, tried to figure out how to get that man on the outside, right? So I wouldn't come into those areas of life and relationship and business with that insecurity, that fear of imposter syndrome coming up. And walking through personal development programs and those things out there, the marquee names, all the people that are big in the business. I tell people I bought or I rented or I grabbed anything that I could get, whether it was free or could pay for it. As much as I could afford, I would grab to try and bring the transformation that I believed I needed. A lot of personal development programs have great changes, but they don't have transformation. They give you great habits to try and manage your life. They don't give you those opportunities to overcome the things that you have and to have victory in your life. So for me, it was really walking that out and being a person of faith, being able to figure out what does it look like to be me, right? Apart from the things I'm doing, who am I really? If I'm not my past, if I'm not the pains, if I'm not the things that I thought I was and the things people spoke over me, well, who is this man? And so starting to unpack that identity aspect, which is foundation for my course, Life Mastery, and my book, Life Mastery, Living Life by Design, started to figure out that I was who I was apart from whether my successes or failures happened. And in that place, really started to create what I considered a blueprint for living it out of my own life. Had some tools, we could unpack, but it was really understanding identity first and accomplishment second that allowed me to understand that, hey, whoever I am walking into it is who I am walking out. If I believe I'm a person of confidence and assurance, I'll find that person showing up. If I believe that I don't have the answers and I'm not sure if I'm going to be able to figure it out, well, that person will show up as well. So we do have some transformational tools that I used on myself to figure it out, but it was really understanding identity. Who am I apart from my things, the things I do, the accomplishments I have?
So for people who are suffering imposter syndrome, how would they overcome it?
Great question. The first thing is it starts with identity. Like I said, the foundation of our whole framework of our course, the blueprint, starts with identity. Who are you created to be? Right? Because we get our identity from, like I said, who I'm created to be or what my past has told me. And so for me growing up and having some struggles in school in different areas, right? You always have this identity statement. When I'm struggling in school, what I find out, I tell myself is I'm not as smart as everybody else. And in that place, you start to live it out. So for us, it's really unpacking the lies that you believed, Imposter syndrome is an identity statement that says, I'm not qualified, I'm not capable. But is that the truth, or is that a lie that you're believing? What I believe is it's a lie that people are believing, that you're capable of success in every area of your life. So the first thing is this: who are you? Who are you apart from your things? It's an identity statement. We call it an I am statement. When you start to understand and unpack who you are, when you start to write it down, I am a man of capability and compassion. I'm a man of fortitude and drive. I'm a man who finishes what I start. I'm black and white. When I'm in, I'm all in, and I finish the things I start. Right? Whatever the statement is that you have. And then we do a second step, which is a celebration list. What do you celebrate about you? Come to find out, Richard, at least in my own life, I could always find fault in myself more than I could find things to celebrate. The things that I did wrong, the things I didn't like about myself versus those things I did. So when you start to write a celebration list, you start to get a more whole picture of who you are. And then what I tell the people that I work with, the third step, the third tool we use is a accomplishment list. Write down 20 things that you've accomplished in your life. With me, I've written down 100. And what that means is, when you get past the 20, 25 items, you start to have those real minor things like, I graduated from high school, I pay my bills on time, I show up to work every day, or whatever the things are that you're doing. But what I find, especially with men that I work with, is that we are always waiting for that marquee moment, right? Winning the World Cup, or, this year is the year of the Olympics. So winning that gold medal before we celebrate ourselves. Not realizing that in your life, you have a track record of accomplishing things on a daily basis that you just don't recognize because you discount them. So with that identity statement, with the celebration list, and with that accomplishment list, we start to figure out a more whole picture of who we are. And then it's those things that you're telling yourself, right? What are the things I'm saying about me? And then that's the transformational strategies that we get into. But it really starts with this: who are you apart from your things? That person is somebody who has capabilities beyond what they can imagine. When you create an I am statement, when you have a celebration list, when you have an accomplishment list, now you can start to see yourself for truly who you are, not what your past has told you.
Is there are there certain people that are more vulnerable to imposter syndrome?
That's a great question. And it's interesting because the people that I work with, whether they're accomplished or not, right? I have high level business individuals, 6, 7, 8 figure, business deals that they're working with, or that stay at home mom, or that student, right? At all levels, what I find is that the commonality is many of us have challenges that come along with it. I have people who are highly successful in business, but at the same time, they're dealing with fear of failure and imposter syndrome and worrying that they're not capable. I mean, these are people that have a track record of success in business. And just like myself, I had business success as well. And I thought when I was successful in business, the fear of failure, the imposter syndrome would go away. But come to find out that it just came along for the ride. The success doesn't change who you believe you are. It's just your attempt to overcome it with your activities. And so I find people that are at high levels of success who have the same issues of fear of failure and imposter syndrome that anybody else does. You'd think success changes that. It doesn't in most cases. Apart from knowing who you are, your experiences, your circumstances have to make up the difference. And unfortunately, if you believe you're a failure waiting to happen, if you believe you're not qualified for what you're stepping into, just because you're successful doesn't silence those voices, those thoughts on the inside. It just is a relief in that moment because you've proven that wrong this time. The problem is next time you run into the same challenges. So we really try and help people transform, not bring habits of change, because habits of change, you can't change your way to freedom and belief in yourself.
So what about people who experience failure in any area of their life? How does imposter syndrome affect them?
That's a great question. That's a great question. It really comes down to what's your definition of failure. And I've been in that place as well, right? That fear of failure. I can't mess up, because really failure it's either an activity statement or an identity statement. So for me in my past, again, growing up with struggles in school and trying to figure it out and feeling like I'm not as smart as other people. Well, what failure meant to me as that young man growing up, even into my adulthood, was failure meant that I'm right. I'm not as smart as, I'm not as qualified. I don't have the capability of other people around me because I create an identity statement of an activity. But when you start to understand who you are, you start to realize that failure is just a part of success. What I tell the people I work with is it's like weightlifting. I've been somebody who's been desiring to be physically fit, and I do my best all the time. When I was younger, I used to study people who would lift heavy weights, bodybuilders, weightlifters, power lifters, those kind of people. And there's an exercise program that they would have, and a certain type that they would use, which would be to train to failure, which means that whatever the exercise is that they're doing it frequently and with as much weight as they can until they couldn't lift the weight one more time. And what they call that is training to failure. The interesting thing was, just because they trained to failure didn't mean that they had this identity statement that says, oh, I guess this exercise isn't for me, I should just stop doing it. But in life, we use failure as an identity statement, and we think failure means that I'm not qualified or capable of the thing I'm walking into. Come to find out, when you work with successful people or you read biographies of all the people I know, I've never met a person yet, never associated with them, never had a conversation with them, who was a success at the very first thing that they tried, the very first time they endeavored to do it. Failure is a product of success, and failure, as I tell the people I work with, is simply a grade I'm giving to where I'm at. It lets me know where I'm at now, so it lets me know where I need to go. It's not a statement of who I am and my capabilities. It's just an understanding of, oh, okay, well, this is my report card telling me where I'm at now, and now I know where I need to improve. When you understand who you are, failure is an identity statement saying I'm a failure. It's an activity statement saying, hey, where's an area I need to grow?
Does past experience, like how you grew up, has an effect on that?
Absolutely, 100%. Right. Myself, I was in a household with a father that I didn't feel like I could measure up with. And this is something that's common to a lot of my students. When you have a household of a strong individual that you feel like you're not as good as, the identity statement you have is, I need to be perfect in order to not fall short, not to be a disappointment, not to let them down. And for all of us, right? When you're in a relationship, Richard, I was in relationships before I got married. And that failure in a relationship where it didn't work out and you're no longer together, all of a sudden you start to think, oh, well, I'm not worth loving. I'm not a person of value in my own life. If you don't understand who you are, a person of value and worth, again, those I am statements, that celebration list, that accomplishment list. If I don't understand who I am, then my past tells me. And like I tell the people that I work with, if you don't know who you are, the world around you will tell you. And unfortunately, what it'll tell you is from your failures, your fall downs, those missteps, and those things that you do wrong. So absolutely, that's part of what of the things that we unpack through our transformational strategies is unpacking your past so that it can't lie to you anymore. It doesn't mean that hurt doesn't happen and challenges we don't walk through. It just means that they shouldn't tell us who we are any longer.
So, so as a child, like if you're growing up, how can a parent like protect their child from that?
That's a great question. I haven't had that question before. I appreciate that. As a parent like myself, I have three children, all adults. At this point, my youngest child is 25. As a parent, they are who they believe they are because of the experiences that they walk through and the things that they're told. And so for me, it's an investment of your words. Of what I say for my own children is, I speak the value into them that I see in them until they see it in themselves. The more you can challenge your children to see higher levels of understanding of who they are, have a vision higher than the circumstances that they're walking through, the more you can allow them to go through challenging things, but help them to process through it so that it's, again, that report card of where I'm at now, not a statement of who I am as a person. So when they fail in school, or they go out for that sports team and they don't make it, or they get that bad grade in a class that they're struggling with, it's not an identity statement or a disappointment. It's just an opportunity to grow in some place. Really, we as parents have the ability to create the culture of what life looks like in our family. And that means speaking empowering things. That means bringing value to the table. That means telling, the truth of who we know our family members are. In this case, parents to child. I tell my children who they are until they believe it for themselves.
You were talking a little bit about perfection before. How
Yeah.
because a lot of people like they're perfectionists, they want to do everything perfect.
Yep.
Talk to us about that, like the effect of perfectionism.
Yeah, and it's the same that I've had in my own life. It's interesting, right? A lot of people, myself included, when you're in a relationship, you'll say, I'm not as hard on other people as I am on myself. I expect perfection for myself, but not the people around me. But it always translates into other relationships. But here's the interesting thing: perfection isn't me just having the highest value of what I'm capable of. Nobody can reach perfection. I can't be 100% perfect in everything I do all the time. And if that's your gauge on whether you're good or not, whether you're valuable or not, whether you're okay or not, then you're always going to let yourself down. Perfectionism is really insecurity played out with the opposite effect, meaning that instead of just displaying insecurity, you're giving yourself a reason to be insecure. And in that place, a lot of times, again, it can be from your childhood. I'm not a psychologist or a psychiatrist, but I do know in my own life, when you have a parent that you feel like you can't measure up to, that you're always disappointing, perfection is the only alternative because that way they can't be disappointed any longer. And many times we take that on for ourselves. So perfectionism has given me the ability to be disappointed in myself on a daily basis. It's an identity statement lived out. And what it says is, I'm not good enough unless I'm perfect. But what's the truth in that? Again, the things that we unpack through some of our transformational tools. One of the things we do in our course and what we do is we unpack where you first felt like you had to be perfect, what the experience was you walked through, what the lie was you believed, and what's the truth in the circumstance. When I start to understand the truth of who I am, that I'm okay, that I'm capable, that I'm valuable, even if I make mistakes, now all of a sudden perfectionism doesn't have a hold on you any longer.
Mindset plays a big part of it because sometimes a lot of voices, negative voices,
Yeah.
come into play. What do you have to say about that?
Yeah, absolutely. Which leads me into our transformational tools. So, for us in Life Mastery and in my book, Life Mastery Living Life by Design, Not by Default, I walk through identity first because that's foundation. And then the transformational strategies, right? The weapons we use against the life we don't want to live. And our transformational strategies are mastering your thoughts, your words, and your actions. I'll just start with thoughts. We can unpack all of them, but we probably won't have time here. But mastering your thoughts, you're absolutely right. It said that, I don't know what the number is, but I believe it's around 60 to 70,000 thoughts we have a day. Most of them we don't realize, right? Like for you and I, we got on this podcast, so we had to make decisions on turning on lights, turning on camera, working with the computer, right? There's thoughts that you have that you're not, they're subconscious, you're not realizing them, but there's also thoughts you have that are speaking to you. And those are the thoughts that we work with. Mastering your thoughts really is this. It's understanding that first off, you can determine the thoughts that you give power to and the ones you don't. And so for us, it's mastering your thoughts by saying, hey, what are you saying about yourself? If what you're saying about yourself doesn't align with the person you believe you're created to be, then it's lying to you. And if it's lying to you, then how can we create a statement of truth that you can remind yourself of until you see that person? You can call it meditations or affirmations or what have you. It doesn't come from a place of, like in many personal development programs, that perfect person I want to be. I'm wealthy, I'm smart, I'm this or that. Those are great statements, but many of them are great philosophies, but they have no instruction in them. But what we tell the people is, again, with that identity statement, what do you say about you? I'm a person of capability and worth. I'm a person of drive and vision. I'm a person that has value, who's worthy of loving and worthy of giving love, right? Whatever the things are that are your statements, what are you reminding yourself? We actively tell them that, life happens on a daily basis for everybody. You're either going to, again, like the title of my book, Live Life by Design, which means that I'm going to produce and remind myself of the thoughts I want to think rather than just let things happen to me and me think negatively. Life by default is you just allow life to happen and you figure it out. Life by design is I know who I'm created to be. I remind myself of who that person is until I see that person showing up in my daily life.
You said you had two more. I think action. What's the other one?
Mastering your words and your actions.
Okay, so what about the action?
Yeah, absolutely. So all transformation happens. So there's, scientifically you could call it neuroplasticity, which means changing the structures of your brain. And the neuroplastic structures are really kind of what I call shortcuts to decision making. Over time, you've determined that you are a certain kind of person. I'm a person who succeeds at things. I'm a person who fails. I'm a person who's loving and is lovable. I'm a person who doesn't get to be loved. Right. And then you create those structures around it. How do you create those neuroplastic structures, shortcuts to decision making? By mastering your thoughts, words, and actions. We talked about thoughts, right? What are the things I'm saying about myself? You could talk about words. What are the things I'm saying out loud? Because they're two things. They're an affirmation of who I believe I am, and they're an instruction for me to live out. And then there's actions. Who do you believe you are? And how can you see that person showing up? So I have my own I am statements. It tells me who I am. It reminds me of the person I'm created to be, not what my past has told me. And so our question in mastering your actions is, what does it look like when that person shows up? right? What I call it is the hero you walking into that relationship or into that job or into that business, into that board meeting, into that interview. What does it look like for that hero person to show up? And as you get a picture of that, the next thing we do is tell you to, okay, well, show up as that person. What does he look like or she look like walking into the room? How do they act? What level of confidence? What are their gestures? What are their words? Right? What is the stature of that person walking in? Come to find out by changing the my biomechanics, by changing my body, by changing my breathing, I can change my emotions and change my attitude. And in that place, you start to see that there's a reaction of the world to what you're doing, and it creates an environment for the person you believe you are to show up, and the responses and the outcomes to be what you're hoping and desiring them to be.
Last words in regards to everything you talked about.
Last words, if the one thing I would tell people is this, I went through a multitude of programs before I actually created one called Life Mastery, because I didn't find transformational strategies. I found good teachings on how to change, but transformation is where it happens. Transformation is where I live out from who I'm created to be, rather than having to remind myself of it all the time. And so the one thing I did right was I always bet on myself. I was unwilling to not believe I could be the person I was created to be. For anybody who's a listener out there watching or whatever, who's hearing this, my desire and challenge for you is this: that you don't give up on yourself, that you're willing to bet on yourself one more time. I have a course that I believe brings transformation, but what I understand is if you don't give up, you'll find that path. You'll find the ability to be the person that you're created to be, to have the success that you desire in whatever area of life that you desire. But it takes this being willing to bet on yourself one more time. If you do that, the answers will come and you'll be able to be that person lived out.
So on that note, I just want to add something. If let's say someone is very like negative, how could they turn that?
Yeah, absolutely. First off, it's identity. Understanding who I'm created to be. The more I know who I am, the more I worry about and work with me rather than having the world make up the difference. People that I know are negative really aren't happy in themselves. They're insecure or they're unhappy. And so the rest of the world has to make a difference. The more I know that I'm the answer walking into the circumstance, the less I worry about the challenge I'm walking into, whether it's in government, in education, in my household, in my job, or in my business. The more I'm confident in me, the less I worry about the world, because I know I'm the difference. I'm not saying it as a metaphor, I'm saying it as a truth. You are the person walking into the circumstance that's the answer. You're not the question. And when I believe I'm the question, I'm worried about it, and the world has to be perfect so I can be happy. When I'm excited about who I am, I'm not worried about the world, because I know I'm impacting it just by living. So that negativity starts with identity and really thoughts. What are you saying? Right? Are you reminding yourself of the truth of who you are and how you can impact the circumstance? Or are you blaming the world around you for what you don't have and seeing the lack there? Changing your thoughts changes your life.
Where can people find you on social media or the internet?
Yeah, absolutely. I try and be a one-stop shop, which means that I have a website. It's freedom-4-life.net, freedom-4-life.net. And out there you can find my book, Life Mastery, Living Life by Design, Not by Default. You can find my course, Life Mastery, and some other things we have. I also have a discovery tool on my website. It's a free tool. You can go out there, take 40 questions, get your sum up your answers at the end, and you'll find out where you're at in your life mastery journey and what next step you can have. I have that out there. I'm on all the socials through, I'm Freedom for Life, underscore Freedom for Life underscores my YouTube channel. And you can find me on all the socials as well.
All right. Thank you, Mark. Nice meeting you. On that note, everybody, thank you for taking the time to listen to the podcast, and we'll see you on the next episode. Bye.